There's a couple things that are really important. One is if Mr. Smith got to keep spending, that doesn't make you wrong. If you had to cut back on Mr. Smith's spending, that doesn't make Mr. Smith or you wrong. It means it's just that's like what the thing is. Like it's a factual situation on the ground that needs to be dealt with. There doesn't need to be a bunch of fancy feelings. That's why I get so fired up about the idea of being a guide instead of a defender of a map, because a defender of a map has all sorts of fancy feelings: shame, blame, I'm wrong, you're right, sue, like all those words that you've used. A guide says, look, a storm blew in. We've spent lots of time in the mountains. We know storms blow in. We have contingency plans. That's what we call them. And in fact, we even talked about it in our first meeting. We said, if this happened, we talked about it. Would you like to die sooner? Would you like to spend less? Would you like to save more? Like, we have all these levers. We talked through which one you'd prefer. Mr. Smith, you told us you'd prefer to cut spending a bit. Guess what? The storm blew in. We don't have to have any fancy feelings. Nothing. We just cut your spending. That's what we talked about, right? Like, I think what's the problem is my young financial planner friend who's a bit paralyzed, and all these other conversations I've had about this, is we've misinterpreted what the job is to live in that world that you just described. Yes, we'll have contingency plans. Yes, we're going to draw the best, most precise plan we can ever have. And we know that when it doesn't work out, we're going to be looking for disconfirming evidence. When it shows up, we already have a plan. And we know it will show up. Like, the easy one for me is like when the market's down 30%. Like, when clients call, it's scary. Like, it's scary for them. It's scary for us. You and I have talked about this ad nauseum. But when it happens, we knew that was going to happen.
Yep.
We didn't know when. It's in the data, but it's still scary. And so you have to realize that that's like, it's not about figuring out a way that you can prevent being quote unquote wrong. And I'm using that word just like in a technical definition. I don't mean like weighted, just incorrect. Your job is not to figure out how to be incorrect. Your job is to recognize that there will be variability, and you have to look people in the face and help them make decisions in irreducible uncertainty. After all the amazing work you have done to reduce the uncertainty, there's still a pile of it. And the pile of it exists within a set of bands, depending on the kind of work you've done. So you've narrowed the bands of it. There's still uncertainty in those bands. And your job is no amount of work, thought, carefulness, big calculators, giant abacuses will get rid of that uncertainty. It's still going to be there. And so then if we can flip the switch to realize like, no, actually, that's what I get paid for.
Right.
Is when that stuff shows up, to be the calm head, to help navigate, to pull the plan off the shelf and go, oh yeah, that's right, Mr. Smith, we talked about this. I've got you. Don't worry. All we have to do is remember those 2009 discussions where people would come in, like the retired couple living off a pension, and they would think it's the end of the world. And we would say, could you go without your cost of living increase for a year or two? And they would be like, what? That's all? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, we already had that in the plan. Like, we already knew, could you just skip your cost of living increase until further notice, maybe 2 or 3 years? What? That's it? Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Right? Because we already knew. So I think that's, to me, is the answer to this worry we have about being precisely correct, is do the work, do everything you can to be as precisely correct as you can, and have a plan when the irreducible uncertainty surely will show up. Greetings, Carl here. Now, that little clip you just watched of Michael Kitces and I, that's from our podcast, Kitces and Carl. And I love those conversations. But did you know, this is sort of a secret, but did you know that there's another conversation? I have another conversation every month. It's a private conversation that you can only hear in my membership program at the Society of Advice. It's called the membership. So here's the deal. I invite one of my favorite people every month. I actually kind of refer to it as Carl Talks to Smart People. So I invite a really smart, impactful person. Sometimes these are really well-known authors and thinkers. Sometimes it's obscure people you'll never have heard of, but I promise you will be massively insightful. And I invite them to have a conversation with me about 3 things. Number 1, the craft of advice. And remember, these are almost always people from outside the financial services industry. So the how to give better advice. Number 2, how to do meaningful work, often in public, because that's kind of hard, a little bit scary, right? And number 3, how to be a better human, because I believe if we want to be better advisors, the best way to start is be better humans, right? So you're invited to that conversation every month. It's 90 minutes, dedicated space on your calendar to think about the impact you want to make. Because I don't know if you get that very often, but I hardly ever get time to think about the impact because I'm so busy doing the things, right? So that's what the membership is. People love it. And you know what? I don't think you should take my word for it. I think you should try. I have an idea. Let's do a free trial. 7-day free trial. There's a link. Just click the link and start your 7-day free trial to see what I'm talking about. Thanks, my friend.